In this example, I've created a basic touchpoint map, and you can see over here I have various touch points listed: the packaging, design, installation, price, warranty, the insulation inside the speaker cabinet. I've included that for a specific reason. The touch points are listed here, and then I've provided an estimate or a measure using listening data of how likely people are to talk about the packaging, the design, the installation. And then I have also, based on those conversations or based on interviews with customers and returns or the kinds of marketing intelligence that you might have, an estimate of my performance each of those touch points. So for example, in packaging, what we're saying is we have a relatively high talk-worthy thing. 7 is pretty high up there, and a performance of 8. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I have a performance of 8 out of 10, and I have a talk-worthiness factor of 7 out of 10. And what we're looking for, again, is sort of a balance between the talk-worthiness, low talk-worthy, it's okay if it's low performance from the social web perspective only. Remember, this isn't the absolute. But certainly our high-performance items, we want to align those with our high talk-worthiness features and so on, so that what people are tending to talk about tend to be the things that we do really well on, so that our consumer on the social web is sort of helping us present our best face, if you will. So what we want to look at here are each of these things, and notice that the talk-worthiness of packaging, the performance of packaging, the talk-worthiness of design, the performance of design. This one that I mentioned, this insulation, I included this as an example of something. If you've ever built speaker cabinets, there's insulation inside, and it plays a role in the sound quality. So our particular brand of speakers, our XP7 bookshelf speaker, we have decent insulation in there. They've got great sound quality. It's partly driven by that. But at the same time, nobody talks about this. So I've included this as a touch point, as an example of something that we do relatively well, but nobody really talks about. So now over here on our touch point chart, if we turn to the chart itself, I've used Excel, by the way, to do this. You can use a plain piece of paper, you can use Excel, you can use a variety of tools to create your chart. On our touch point map, I've plotted each of the points. So my insulation, here's my 3 talk-worthiness and my 6 performance. On my design, here's my 9 talk-worthiness, right? If I look at these two, my 9 talk-worthiness and my 9 in terms of performance. And you can see that in general, I've got a pretty nice line going through here. There's a couple that I want to talk about. Number one, the insulation, which I talked about earlier. This one, relatively low talk-worthiness, relatively high performance. I can do a couple of things here. I could, for example, talk about this particular aspect of speaker design and how important this is, and if you've ever had sort of a hollow bass or a resonating bass or something like that, or it just doesn't sound as boom, boom, kind of full, that these are the kinds of differentiators in the design of the XP7 that actually makes it sound that way. And so it's worth looking into and understanding that kind of stuff. At the same time, we also see that high on the talk-worthy scale, but sort of below the line, if I just create this diagonal line right across here, the price is below that, is significantly below that line. So what this is generally saying is that people are probably talking negatively about the fact that the XP7 tends to be a relatively expensive speaker. So here I've got 2 choices. I can make the speaker cheaper, right? Which I don't necessarily want to do. We're known for high quality, and I don't necessarily want to do that. Or I can talk about things like the insulation, like the packaging and other things that we really do well on, and make sure that people understand why the price is high. So what that'll tend to do is that'll tend to mitigate the negative conversation, but at the same time leaves my product priced where I want it and that kind of thing. So as you go through your touch point chart, there's actually a lot that you can learn from this. But what we're focusing on is the relationship between performance and talk-worthiness. So again, in summary, I've collected up for Acme Hi-Fi a handful of touch points for our XP7 bookshelf speaker. For each one, I've looked at the talk-worthiness and the performance of those, and then I've just plotted those on a chart for the purpose being, if I just look at sort of a diagonal line right across here, anything that's below that anything that's below that line is potentially being talked about in a negative way that is actually, sort of hurting my purchase process. In other words, the talk value itself is high enough that negative performance is going to actually end up, kind of retarding my purchase process, which I really don't want. I want to amplify that purchase process. So we just imagine a line right across here. These couple of things are below this. Some of these are above. If they're a little bit above or below, we don't have to really worry about that. We're not going to get a straight line across here. But if they're outliers, like the insulation or the price, then that's simply a cue to us that we want to jump into that and look at that in more detail. So in the exercise, what I'd like you to do is to think of 3 touch points likely to drive some conversation. 3 things that people talk about. Maybe some they talk about more than others. Don't just pick 3 very high talk value things, because you'll just get a clump of points up in one part of your chart. But think of some things that people talk about a lot that they don't talk about very much with regard to your product. And then for each of those, how would you describe your performance, and how likely is this thing to drive a conversation on the social web? Plot your results on the worksheet, and then, similar to what I just showed you, go ahead and do an analysis on that and draw some conclusions about the things that people are talking about. Are these very positive experiences? If they are, that's great. If not, then jump back and think about how they got to be that way. Who else is it in your organization that helps to create that experience? And look to them to help you do something about this. So here's your actual chart. You can create something on paper that's literally this simple, or you can use an Excel spreadsheet and make this as complex as you'd like. But the key is to simply understand the relationship between performance at various points of customer interaction and how likely your customers are to talk about those various points of interaction. So touch points, absolutely key in driving conversations. Touch points can be measured. So here's a place where you can start to step into true quantitative measurement and analytics. And then you want your focus to be on the talk-worthy touch points, and make sure that you're getting those things right, because those are going to be the sources of the conversations that show up about your product, brand, or service on the social web.